Before we begin, a reminder. This podcast discusses mature themes that may not be appropriate for all audiences. Please listen with care.
Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of
Is that a yes?
the conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is that a yes? So I'm trying to get a yes or no. I'm not trying to get a speech.
This is the Rainbow Mafia section of that radical LGBTQ movement.
Do your grandchildren know you guys are transphobic pieces of shit? Do they know that you would sell them out if they transition? I hope you die.
I disagree with you, and so you call it hate.
You are being hateful when you tell somebody that identifies as a man that they're not a man.
That's not hateful. That's a fact.
We use the DSM-5 now for psychologists to be able to talk.
I literally cited the DSM-5 in the speech, and it's called gender dysphoria, which I use throughout the speech, not gender identity.
You sound like a bozo, bro.
If you see a tough, punch him in the face.
It's a complicated spectrum.
It's not complicated, but you also didn't define. So what is a woman? What is a female? What do these words mean?
It's complicated.
My name is Abigail Favale. I'm a writer and college professor, and for the first half of my academic career, I was immersed in the world of gender studies. 10 years ago, much to my surprise and the surprise of everyone around me, I became Catholic. As my conversion unfolded, I entered into a new way of seeing, what you might call a sacramental understanding of reality. And in that strange light, everything took on new meaning, especially the questions I'd been chasing my entire adult life. What does it mean to be a woman? What is the significance of embodiment and sexual difference? What is this mysterious thing we call gender? The urgency of those questions has only increased in the decade I've been Catholic. As we heard a few moments ago, these are charged questions, and they evoke impassioned responses. In our time, nothing has created more division in Christian communities than questions of gender, sexuality, and identity. Nearly every major Christian denomination has split over these questions. I feel the fault lines of that fracture deeply. They run through my own life, my own heart. I've lived both sides of the divide. We live in a fractured, contentious time, and in one sense, this is nothing new. The church in every age is confronted with new questions and challenges that spark deep controversy. These intense debates allow the church to clarify her teaching and generate new ways of sharing her wisdom with the world. Times of controversy, then, are also times of opportunity. We're called to go toward the point of tension, not to shy away from it. But how can we do that well when the stakes are so high and the battle lines so entrenched? When truth and love seem to have split off from one another into opposing camps? Entering into that tension, into the apparent gap between truth and love, is the goal of this podcast. Throughout this series, we will be taking an in-depth look at gender, at its many conflicting meanings in our time, and explore how we as Christians can remain grounded in truth while walking the way of love. Along the way, we will receive the first-hand stories of fellow Christians who wrestle with gender in various ways while pursuing Christ in the midst of it. This podcast is not an attempt to exhaustively cover every angle or perspective in the gender debates. We won't be discussing youth gender medicine or conflicts about single-sex spaces. That's not because I think those questions don't matter. They do, profoundly. And I've engaged with those questions in some of my written work, especially in my book, The Genesis of Gender. But this project has a different focus. We're trying to capture stories and angles that don't make much of an appearance in these public debates. In this series, we're focused on two things. First, gaining a better understanding of the Catholic vision of gender. And secondly, encountering adult Christians who feel a sense of disconnect with their gender in order to better understand how to accompany someone who is navigating this experience. We'll talk with men and women who have chosen not to transition, some who have detransitioned, and some who have transitioned. Some aspects of these stories might make us uncomfortable or present a choice or perspective that we don't agree with. We're hoping that you will choose to enter into that tension with us, to risk discomfort in order to meet people where they are, so we can walk toward Christ together. I'm Abigail Favale, and you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This is episode 1, Us and Them. In this first episode, we will hear from Gene about his own personal story with gender discordance. But before we get there, I want to dig a little further into the vision for this podcast.
Even if we accept the principle of truth and charity, I think often in practice we separate them.
This is Sister Maria Gemma Salyer.
I think if we can keep in mind that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus is love incarnate, we can imagine that we're talking about a person. When we say truth and charity, we're basically saying, how would Jesus encounter this person?
In preparation for this podcast series, I wanted to pick Sister's brain about bridging the gap between truth and love in the discourse surrounding gender. She brings an invaluable perspective to the conversation. On the one hand, she has deeply studied both sides of the question, theological and pastoral. In her master's work, she focused on the theology and philosophy of gender, particularly the work of Edith Stein, and her doctoral research was on LGBTQ students' sense of belonging at Catholic universities. She also currently works on a college campus, and like we heard in that introductory montage, much of the ill will and caustic rhetoric surrounding this conversation has sprung from campus debates. I also wanted to talk to Sister because, well, she adores Christ. In fact, she belongs to an order that has a charism of continual prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, the Sisters of St. Francis of Perpetual Adoration. Sister Maria Gemma hasn't just thought about how to embody truth and love, she's actually living it. So I wanted to ask her, if Christ is our ultimate model of perfect truth and love, how would he treat someone today? Or how wouldn't he treat someone?
Jesus is never going to lie to someone. Jesus is also never going to walk away from someone. Jesus is going to encounter someone. And so I think encounter is the key word here, that we are coming into the presence of another immortal soul. And wow, if we could keep that in mind in all of our encounters throughout the day, what a difference that would make in the world. But we encounter someone and accompany them. Accompaniment is a gradual process. Jesus modeled that well, that you don't just meet someone, throw a truth at them, and expect an entire life to change. We don't do that with any other thing. Why would we expect that to work on issues of sexuality and gender, which are so deeply personal to someone? So I think we need to come at these situations acknowledging the depth of the experience that an individual is having, acknowledging that things take time, that human beings take time.
We'll hear more from Sister Maria Gemma at a later point in this series. But leaving our conversation, I couldn't help but wonder, what would it look like to engage the gender question with a spirit of encounter rather than enmity? Can we bridge the gap between truth and love? Can we encounter the person today as Christ would?
I'm the department head chair of philosophy at St. Joseph's College in Maine.
You're hearing the voice of Jake Thibault. He's an interesting guy.
I have a PhD in ethics, a Juris Doctorate in law, an MBA in business, and a master's degree in theology.
Like I said, an interesting guy. But that's not the only reason we're listening to him right now.
And I have a transgender foster child and many friends who are transgender, so that's how I got involved in this question. Is that good?
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful.
Jake's education and personal connections give him a unique perspective on the gender question. So does his spiritual journey.
So I was a Protestant pastor for about 10 years, and my parish was largely LGBT. And then with that, I also sat on the Council of Churches, and that was a big issue at the time, was the LGBT issue. And it just, my heart always went out for people who felt abandoned, neglected. You know, the story of the Good Shepherd leaving behind the 99 to go after the one always really resonated with me. And I felt like, well, who's the most abandoned, neglected? And I want to bring them into the love of God and to be in communion with people who just don't feel like they have any place within society, and to kind of live with them. And so I was a foster parent, and the first foster child I had was 17 years old and was identified as transgender. So that was one of the first experiences I had of kind of a close relationship with somebody who was transgender. And over time, I made friends with people who struggled with it. And so it was something that was really important to me. At the same time, it seemed like there was a lot of there was kind of a transgender movement that was kind of blowing up. And it also made me question, kind of made me question the narrative that everyone who claims that they're transgender has the same condition or the same situation going on within them. It seemed like there were some people had a real struggle with gender dysphoria, and seemed like there were other people who were kind of trying stuff out. It does seem like it was different, and it seemed like as time was going on, more people were kind of just trying it out, which made me wonder, well, how are you supposed to respond? How can you be a good friend? How can you be a good pastor? How can you accurately address people when it seems like there's different causes of what we're calling transgender? So at the time, I was trying to figure out what to do for my doctoral dissertation, and at the same time, I was coming back into communion with the Roman Catholic Church. And so I figured I'll pick this topic. Like, what does secular society typically think transgender means? So I went to Provincetown and picked up every book on transgender, one of these wonderful lesbian bookstores. I picked up every book they had. I read them all when I was preparing for my book, because I really don't want to make a straw man argument about anything. I don't want to assume what people are saying. I want to read. I really want to understand it.
Jake's book is full of compelling ideas. But here, I want to highlight a feature of his book that I've never seen before. One that makes it unlike any other book about gender or any academic book I've ever read. Pictures. Interspersed through weighty academic discussions of nominalism and neuroscience are sketches of real people's faces, illustrations of the various people he's dialoguing with, from Catholic saints to feminist philosophers to transgender activists. I wanted to know why he chose to include these portraits.
Yeah, I paid an artist to make a lot of images, which was a big investment. But I thought it was important for two reasons. First, I think anything that's Catholic should also be beautiful. I think even if it's a very academic text filled with scientific studies, it should still be beautiful and echo something of the divine, I think. But second, I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of that the people on both sides of the argument are people, and they're beautiful people made in the image and likeness of God. So nobody is demonized in my book. I try not to demonize. I can sometimes criticize positions, but not people, or to question anybody's motives. But I think also it's important when we're talking about somebody to see their face. It's harder to hate somebody when you see somebody face to face, right? The anonymousness of online discussion can lead to some terrible conversations. But that typically doesn't happen when you're meeting people face to face. So I wanted people to see the people who we're talking about as they are, right? So even the people who are in there who are transgender, it's easy to kind of mock transgender people and say, well, you don't really look like a woman, or you just look like a man in a dress. And I just want to show people as favorably as I could, right? And this is, again, I think I tried to do it in the Thomistic breath. And I think that's a Thomistic thing, right? Thomas Aquinas in the Summa, he doesn't try to strawman anyone, right? He shores up everyone's arguments, because when we have the best arguments set forward, we're more likely to come to the truth. When we strawman people, we can feel very assured of our opinions, but it's not the truth. And we want the truth, because the truth is the thing that will help us as a society. It will help us to be better neighbors. It will help us to be better pastors and friends to people who identify as transgender or have gender dysphoria. And that even the people that you might disagree with who are conservative, they're people too, right? So that we can see each other's humanity, I think is really important. And even after I wrote my book, I reached out to a lot of the people whose books I read, conservative and liberal. And I've had nice conversations with people where we don't agree on issues, but we have wonderful, nice conversations, because everybody who's writing on the issue is a very thoughtful person. You know, people are very thoughtful on both sides of this issue. I don't always agree with them, but usually I don't agree with them philosophically, but it doesn't mean that we can't still be friends.
Jake's pictures were an inspiration for this project. He got me thinking about how I could use this podcast as an opportunity to encounter others face to face, as Christ encounters each of us, even through an auditory medium. In all the heat and noise of the culture wars, I'm worried there's one thing that is getting lost: the person. It can be tempting in our polarized culture to see other people as walking ideologies, especially those who experience a sense of disconnect with their maleness or femaleness, an experience that we'll call gender discordance. But what if the person who's struggling with gender is not out there beyond the boundaries of the church? What if he's here in the pew next to you at Mass?
All right, cool. Well, why don't you just jump into your story wherever it makes sense to start in terms of your journey with God, but also your experience of gender.
Wow. Okay. So no pre-planning for this. This is the raw dump.
This is Jean, lifelong Christian, father, husband, Catholic convert, and he experiences gender discordance.
So, grew up in a Christian home that I would describe as somewhat biblicist, fundamentalist, home church, and I was raised to love God. I made a decision and wanted to be baptized at age 8, and that was great. But it was probably 3 years before that, about age 5, that I remember my first feelings of what I would now call gender discordance. And people describe these things differently. I think for me, it was kind of a sense that I wanted the things of the other. They represented me better. They characterized me better. Those are all very early feelings. And as I went through my childhood, those feelings became stronger. It was almost like this feeling of, oh, well, eventually we'll get there. Eventually I will be what I think I'm supposed to be. But I probably couldn't have characterized it in that way at the time. As I got into college years, these feelings didn't go away. They got stronger. But, and this is something I got to give my parents credit for. They never tried to impose gender stereotypes on me. I figure skated, I did music, theater, mime, all sorts of things. They encouraged me whichever direction I was interested in. So I've got to give them a lot of credit for that. I still took away from my childhood, probably through other avenues, very strict sense of here's how you play your role. Here's how you can be. This is what God wants a man to be. Here's how a woman should be. And you can break that down into so many different areas. Aesthetics, carriage, presentation, voice, behaviors, roles, activities that you can and can't do or shouldn't aspire to. And I got the message. Like I was, part of me was listening and I got that message from my society.
What Jean's getting at here are ideas called gender norms. You're probably familiar with the basic idea. These are cultural ideals or expectations that we associate with each sex, which may or may not be rooted in biological reality. On a rather basic and superficial level, we can think boys like blue, girls like pink. More complex gender norms may relate to how men and women should interact within the home or the workplace. Jean's experience of longing for the things that might be deemed proper to the opposite sex is not uncommon when speaking to those who experience gender discordance. In fact, for many of the men and women interviewed for this podcast, their earliest memories of this disconnect are linked to moments when they felt that they were breaking from a gender norm that they had learned at a young age. Hence the name gender discordance, a sense of disconnect or discord with one's identity as a man or woman. This might manifest as a deep discomfort with cultural gender norms and expectations, or sometimes as a sense of alienation from one's own body. We'll be using the term gender discordance throughout the podcast as a general way to capture these experiences, which can show up in many different ways, as we shall see.
People have asked, how do you characterize this feeling? And some people will say, well, I feel like I was born into the wrong body, and that's valid for their experience. I think what I've said more is if you take any characteristic, any parameter, any role, I've always much more identified and found myself as belonging to the ones that are stereotypically considered female or feminine. Later on in life, when I finally told a very conservative friend and my dad about these things, they both said, why don't you just assume that the things that you feel that you are okay for a man to be? I'm still not sure I've accepted that, but it was really interesting how, as we talk about these parameters and these characteristics, I really did receive the messaging that it's not okay for a man to be this way, or it's not okay for a woman to be that way.
Jean's making an important clarification here. This is his personal experience of gender discordance. His journey is as unique and unrepeatable as he is as a person. Jake's books included pictures so that his readers could meet the subjects face to face. My hope is to do something similar in this podcast with stories. So I want to invite you to sit back over the next few minutes and listen to Jean's story in his own words. Let's meet Jean.
I met a wonderful woman. Solving all my problems of my own humanity was not the first thing on my mind. We really hit it off. Our families were from similar backgrounds. Problem was, we lived on opposite sides of the country, and I think I was 16 at the time. And so we started up a long distance relationship, which persisted for 7 years until we were finally married. And of course, we had talked about this, the issue of my gender discordance, although we didn't have that term for it when we got married. And we both thought that was something that was just an experience that I'd had in the past and it was going to go away. Of course, it didn't go away like so many things. And you're married, Abby, you know how it is. There's so many things hitting at you. There's so many tensions in life and so many factors stacking up that this becomes one of many things that you deal with. So as we grew, the tension of that probably popped back out after, I would say, 3 years. And this, I think, is a common characteristic of what I would characterize as marriage idolatry. People think marriage is going to solve it. I've been holding back all these feelings. I've been repressing all these feelings. This doesn't just apply to gender discordance. Like, this applies to an awful lot of things. I've been holding back these feelings. I've been repressing these feelings. And this person is going to solve me. This person is going to fix my problems. And instead, this person's bringing a lot of their own problems to the table. I'm going to fast forward. Things were not good on the gender front. We had gone through, in some earlier years, a church split as well that had us sort of reeling in the evangelical world that we found ourselves in. We did end up landing at a wonderful, loving evangelical church where people really embodied the love of Christ to us. And of course, like is often the case, this issue, the gender issue, was one that just didn't talk about. How do you talk about it? Because if you talk about it, and so my wife and I were both trapped in this because she didn't want to go talking to everybody about this issue. And if you go talk to somebody in the church, usually they have an answer for you. And it's pretty much, well, that's from the devil. You just need to renounce that and get on with your life. Be the man that God created you to be. I knew exactly what answer I'd get there. And then if you go and you talk to the secular world, they're going to tell you, oh, you're a woman. You need to transition. And neither of those actually embodied the experience. Like, who am I and how do I move forward? I already knew that the answers I was going to get were not, they weren't going to suffice. So we were both just living in a lot of pain with this unresolved. It was getting really, really bad. And then about 2018, my wife discovered that Anna Carter from Eden Invitation was going to be coming, and she had just started the organization a few years prior. It's very small, and Eden Invitation is a Catholic lay apostolate that ministers to people with same-sex attraction and gender discordance, as well as other experiences on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. My wife said to me, this woman is coming to our area and she's going to be talking about these kinds of issues, sort of. This isn't your experience exactly, but do you want to go? And I'm like, yes, anything. Let's go. And so she ended up calling them up. It was a youth, older youth or college age, young adult ministry that had brought Anna to town. And my wife called them up and said, well, we're not youth and we're not Catholic, but can we come? And they said, oh yeah, please come. We'd love to have you. And something interesting happened there. That night I had gone up to Anna and just poured out my heart about gender discordance. And at the time they weren't doing too much about it. It was mostly same-sex attraction that they were dealing with. But she said, this is something we want to deal with. This is something we want to embrace. So yeah, you'd be welcome here. Just pardon our dust while we're figuring it out. And of course, this is 2018. Now we're at Eden Invitation, working heavily in that area. But I finally was able to join EI, and that's where I was introduced to John Paul II's Theology of the Body, which we all talk about and most of us have never read all the way through. But what a treasure trove. But as a still evangelical Protestant at the time, what I respected about what I was hearing through Eden Invitation and through Theology of the Body, It's basically a commentary on Jesus in Genesis. It's like a really good commentary, like any biblicist would love this. It's just unpacking scripture, and it's saying when Jesus wanted to address issues of human sexuality, he went back to the beginning. He said, from the beginning, from the beginning, from the beginning. And so that was beautiful, because it started to help me see that there was a way of thinking that was in line with how I'd been taught to think about the scriptures. EI also brought a concept to me. Eden Invitation also brought a concept to me. This idea of press into the longing. Press in what? That seems almost scandalous. Like they were saying this Catholic catechism teaches that desires of certain types are disordered. How could you press into the longing and remain faithful to traditional Christian teaching? That just doesn't make any sense. And of course, that goes back to Augustine's, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. That every longing is made for God, and that the solution isn't to repress it, nor always to express it, to see it transformed into that deeper longing for Christ. And that was revolutionary to me. That was a completely new way of thinking that I'd never experienced before.
It can be easy to react to misguided or uncomfortable desires with either repression or total acceptance, whether that's in our lives or the lives of other people. As Jean just described, however, there is another option. We can acknowledge the longing and invite God to meet us there. According to St. Augustine, within every desire is a desire for something good. So even when we long for wrong or harmful things, there's something within us that is grasping for true goodness, which is ultimately found in God. We should not simply repress these desires or blindly follow them, but rather find within them the golden thread that is leading us toward God. Jake also had some thoughts on this when we spoke.
I talked to, when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, when I was out at Pluskett Abbey, there was a brain surgeon that came out and he gave a talk to the monks. And he says, I don't like all these people who think that repression is the best way to deal with your issues. Repression only makes things worse, right? You have to integrate your feelings in some way. You need to be able to understand your feelings and to accept your feelings, but to live them in a healthy way. But this kind of approach that you just repress it and it all goes away, it says it never worked. It has never worked. So I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that, right? Especially been in religious life or around religious life. The best adapted celibates are the ones who are most truly themselves, the ones that really kind of feel free to express who they are. The more characters you have in a community, the more healthy the community is, because you have a community of people who are authentically who they are, not repressing themselves or trying to fit into a mold that doesn't really apply to them. Because it's not ultimately up to me to invent myself; it's up to me to uncover what God is creating in me. Right? God has a better plan for me than I have for myself, but it's being able to lay down my own desires to live according to what God desires for me, which will bring me my true happiness.
Now, back to Jean.
So through different means and through different ways, my wife and I and some of our older kids started to head in this direction of the Catholic Church. So it's been about 2.5 years now since I was confirmed in the Catholic faith. And it hasn't always been easy. One of the things that we didn't talk a lot about was the cross in my evangelical Protestant days, and our sharing in the sufferings of Christ. And that's now entered my frame of reference, that maybe Jesus didn't come to give us this perfectly comfortable life on earth, that maybe pain isn't always an indication of personal sin. Maybe it's an indication that it's time to participate in the sufferings of Christ, to recognize that he has paid the price, and that now I get to participate redemptively in that work. What does that mean for my gender discordance? I went through a conviction about 6 months ago. I was asking God in adoration, what's permissible? I think we often make that mistake. We ask the question, what's permissible? Can I do this? Could I do these interventions? This is only a question of private revelation, right? This isn't, no one should ever listen to this and go, well, somebody told this person that God says this. No. But the answer that I got from God was, yeah, you could do those things. That's weird. Not going to get a hard no. But I also got another answer, which was that I needed to live a life as an integrated person. I couldn't live a life that was two-faced. And it was interesting because just a few weeks ago, I was looking up the definition of chastity. And of course, if anyone's listening who is a Protestant, we believe that chastity meant celibacy. But that's not what the Catholic Church means by chastity. It's possession of the vessel, as St. Paul says. It's living a life in sanctification and honor. And chastity, the Catechism says, tolerates neither duplicity nor sort of a two-facedness. There is in chastity this call to live a life that is whole.
This is important. In the Catholic understanding, chastity does not simply refer to sexual abstinence. The Catechism describes chastity as the successful integration of sexuality within the person, and thus the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. The chaste person is the one who maintains the integrity of the powers of life and love placed in him. Chastity, then, is connected to wholeness and inner harmony, the right ordering of our loves. And pursuing this kind of integration is a long process, requiring both our continued effort and God's grace.
So I actually don't know what that means for me. Those feelings certainly haven't gone away. They're ones I wrestle with, but they're ones that I now feel the call to live in an integrated way. And pressing into integration more than anything it doesn't solve the problem. Like if anyone's listening and they're like, well, I wrestle with gender discordance and I want a solution, like that integration will not solve the problem, but there is a sense of peace, of I'm not living a lie. If I'm talking about it, if I'm expressing what I in good conscience can express, if I'm exploring things that make other people uncomfortable but aren't against the teaching of the church, it's really weird to be in such a vulnerable place, but also to be asked to be bold and to maybe offend a few people, not intentionally, but just because people have their neat little rules. So my journey is very incomplete. God hasn't given me real hard answers. I'm moving slowly because I have a family to take care of. And it's been quite a journey. So I'm thankful that God's been doing a lot of healing. If you learn your gender as a role, it happens to be that if you play it really well, good things often happen. If this is how society wants you to be and you do it really well, you often get what you were supposedly looking for, right? So these ideas of strength and steadfastness and having the right answer and very, people say masculine ideals. Of course, now I look at it and I go, everybody needs strength and steadfastness. No one's exempt from needing, things that I think in the Catholic faith would often call virtues. And so I was enjoying, I guess, a lot of success at the things that I was supposed to be because of my gender. And I was feeling empty because every time it was like, well, you should be taking joy in this. You have a wonderful family. You have a wonderful wife. But almost the fact that I was the male in the picture poisoned it for me because I had gotten there being what I didn't want to be. I would much rather be beautiful and desired and wanted. I mean, maybe it's going too far to say objectified. A lot of women are like, I wish people would stop doing that to me, right? Like, I think it was really, I wanted with what I knew to be the drawbacks too, right? Because there's men and women both have drawbacks to their existence, to the stereotypes. There's things that make that being a man or a woman very hard in our society. But even with those, I would have, and at some level I can still say, I would much rather be the other. I would much rather receive praise for a different set of things. I would much rather be seen as doing well for a different set of things that are valued. And we could bring in here the idea of cultural acceptance, right? Let me put it this way. Is it enough to think internal to myself, well, I wish I was a woman, or I am a woman? Would that be enough? Would that satisfy that feeling, that wrongness inside of me, if I just acknowledged it? And I think for most people, certainly for me, the answer would be no. There's an element of, I want to be seen this way. I want to be accepted as who I see myself as. So I think it was always in terms of like, I want to express this. I think beyond that, there's always a sense of I want to be received in this way. Because when we feel like we are putting something on, when we are putting a role on, I think there's a lot of people who probably resonate with this idea. Like, yes, I'm accepted, but if you knew the real me, you wouldn't accept me. You love me, you celebrate me, you accept me. But if you knew who I really was, if I really showed you myself, you probably wouldn't. So I think for me, there was a large element of knowing that I had to put a facade on to be accepted. And then you find yourself stuck because it's like, well, yeah, at some level, if you're in an in-between place, people get really, really uncomfortable. So yeah, you kind of do have to either commit and transition and hope that people accept you that way, or you have to apparently keep playing into the same role that everybody expects, and you have to just. So it's a real, what we were talking about earlier of exploring integration of traditional masculinity and femininity. Those social expectations keep people afraid to talk, afraid to express, and then for many it's, I think, if you knew who I was, you wouldn't love me. Which I have to say, it's not true of my wife. She knows who I am and she loves me fully.
One reason we're starting with Gene's story is that his experiences raise so many of the questions and topics we will be exploring in future episodes. How do we deal with unmet desires? Are our cultural ideals and expectations about manhood and womanhood too narrow and simplistic? Is gender about performing a particular role or about being a certain kind of body? And how do we live out our gender in different vocations, different states of life?
In the Catholic faith, we talk about marriage as a sacrament that is for sanctification, right? That is to purify us. It's not a so I get what I want. It's so that I'm made into what he wants. And I've started to explore the idea in my own mind that maybe, if like is the case, as I've noticed with so many of our brothers and sisters in consecrated or religious life, living out celibate vocation, but what I've noticed is that they seem to be very, very balanced people. It really seemed to be like the women are crazy strong and the men are crazy gentle. And in a person, they embody that. And is it almost like in marriage, I need somebody to, not to validate my secular masculinity, but to break it down. And maybe a woman needs someone not to validate her fragile femininity, but to call her in a different direction. And when I look at our celibate brothers and sisters who so embody what I would say the fullness of Christ, I think to myself, maybe we're the impoverished ones in marriage who have to go through this crucible to get to where they are. In what I call marriage idolatry, there is a glorification of stereotypes. There's a glorification of stereotypes. The fact that you can look at two bell curves that overlap mightily, you need to be the peak of your bell curve. Or maybe you need to be the extreme of it, I don't know, but oftentimes it's the peak, right? And then if you want to experience the other, well, then you need to get married so that you can find, if you're you need to be the most masculine male you can be, and then you need to find the most feminine female you can, and then you will be satisfied. And it was actually my dad who was the first person ever to tell me, Gene, God the Father isn't male or female. All the characteristics that are then subdivided into male and female, God the Father is all of those things.
Wondered when you were talking about how you became a father, how did that affect your experience of gender?
Yeah, it made it 10 times worse.
Wow.
Yeah, because then it was sort of like, okay, I guess I can't deny that I'm male. I think the biggest danger from a Catholic perspective for somebody with gender, well, I shouldn't say the biggest, one of the biggest dangers that I've encountered is the Catechism says we're supposed to receive our sexuality as good. The journey to accept who I am and how I'm made as good, whether or not we believe it could change, that's a completely separate question. But to say that what I am is good and a gift of God, now what shall we do with it, I think is a healthy integration. And frankly, it's a hard one, right? Because if you are pretty sure you don't want to be what you are, but you're being told you need to acknowledge it as good, then even if something like transition is possible or might even be right in some cases, it doesn't get me out of needing to acknowledge, to receive the gift of what I am. And I think that's hard. That's a wrestling, right? How do you receive the gift of, and I think everybody, even without gender discordance, can go through this. Like, I wish I were different. I wish I was something different. And sometimes it's completely acceptable to work on that. And I think we should be a little bit more open to that. But maybe we should start with, you are good and you're made in the image of a loving God, just as you are. I don't want to also lose the fact that in this broken world, I think we can get so focused on the details a lot of the time that we sort of miss the mystery of it. I think it is important that we can affirm that God's design is male and female. If we lose that, procreation of the species will be a little bit difficult. I mean, it's there for more than just that, but it's there for that reason as well. In our own marriage, we've found the iconography of Christ in the church, not the roles, not the expectations, not the stereotypes, but the iconography as being very powerful.
Another feature in Catholic thought is that humankind as a whole is a bride. So humankind is feminine in relation to God in the sense that our receptivity and surrender to divine love is kind of what every person is called to, and that's the apex of creatureliness. Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen with respect to males, because typical American maleness celebrates everything that's the opposite of what the bride of Christ is supposed to be. I am a member of the bride, right? And that's a big comfort to me. One of the things that has been a recent deep dive, and I think this applies to gender and friendship and everything else, is Mary's fiat. Some of these Marian devotions it's freakish how much sense they make when your whole brain starts to change. Like, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. How can you say that? What is wrong with you? Have you gone off the deep end? And it's like, no, because that's the promise of what Jesus can do with you when you surrender. And it's just like, it blows your mind. But this idea of fiat, this word that in Latin can be used when God creates light, fiat lux. I consent with authority that light come into being, or thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, fiat. Or when Mary says, be it done unto me according to your word, it's consent with authority. And there's one thing that God has given us the right and the power to become. We can't form the world, we can't make light, we don't get to just arbitrarily decide, hey, I'm going to be this other thing, this other gender. But fiat, be it done unto me according to your word, that's been precious and powerful to me. So there's a lot of hope in resting in the idea of you've given me one choice, the right and the power to become a child of God.
I think by having our prejudices and our judgments, we're missing out on people who have a lot to give to the church and who are living really holy, exemplary lives, and we're missing their witness because we have our blinders on. So I would just say, can we just take off our blinders to see the person and to allow ourselves to be transformed by the witness that these lives are offering the church right now? I think this is something we need going into the future, is the living witness of saints who have these experiences and are choosing Jesus repeatedly.
That was Sister Maria Gemma again. And that, dear listener, is the goal of this project, to tell the stories of people who in different ways have experienced a sense of dissonance with their gender, yet who, in the midst of that, are choosing to follow Christ again and again. We have more stories to tell, but before we get to those, we probably need to address the elephant in the room. What even is gender anyway? Next time. From the McGrath Institute for Church Life at the University of Notre Dame, you're listening to the Gender Accompaniment Project. This series is written and hosted by me, Abigail Favale. Our producers are Nick and Corinne Starsinik, and our executive producer is Noah Braden. Special thanks to Sister Maria Gemma Salyer, Jake Thibault, and Jean for being part of today's episode. Thanks for listening.